That anxiety is your brain's alarm system, an ancient mechanism designed to keep you safe, alert, and alive. The problem isn't that your brain sounds the alarm, it's that for many people today, the alarm never shuts off. Anxiety is not your enemy, it's your brain sending a signal that something needs attention. Too often people see anxiety as a flaw, a weakness, or even a curse they must fight against. In reality, anxiety is a message, a form of communication from the brain and body that something in your inner or outer world is out of balance. When understood properly, anxiety can serve as a guide pointing you toward areas of life that need change, care, or healing. The problem is not that anxiety exists, but that we often misunderstand it or let it run unchecked without learning what it is trying to tell us. From a biological perspective, anxiety is your brain's alarm system. The amygdala, a part of the brain designed to detect threats, sends signals to heighten awareness and prepare for action. In times of real danger, this response is life-saving. Your heart races, your breathing quickens, and your muscles tense, preparing you to either fight or flee. But in modern life, this system often gets triggered by stressors that are not physically dangerous. Work deadlines, financial struggles, relationship conflicts, or even negative thought patterns. The brain does not always know the difference between a predator in the wild and an overwhelming email inbox. The sensation of anxiety becomes constant, but the original purpose remains the same, to alert you that something needs to change. When you see anxiety as the enemy, you begin to fight yourself. This only adds more tension and stress, making the symptoms worse. But when you reframe it as a signal, you shift from resistance to curiosity. Instead of asking, why is this happening to me? You begin to ask, what is my brain trying to tell me? Often the answer is simple yet profound. It may be that your body needs more rest. It may be signaling that the diet of caffeine, sugar, and processed food is overstimulating your nervous system. It may be pointing to unresolved emotional pain or an overload of responsibilities that your mind can no longer carry alone. By listening to anxiety rather than suppressing it, you begin to uncover solutions. Sometimes the solution is lifestyle based, improving sleep, reducing stimulants, exercising, or practicing mindfulness. Sometimes the solution is emotional, learning to manage stress, setting healthier boundaries, or addressing negative self-talk. And sometimes it is relational, reminding you to seek support, connection, or professional help. Whatever the root cause, the message is that your current path is unsustainable and something needs to shift. The hopeful truth is that anxiety is not permanent. Brains are adaptable. Through consistent choices, breathing exercises, gratitude practices, nourishing food, and intentional thought patterns, the brain can calm its alarm system and regain balance. What once felt like a storm can transform into clarity, strength, and resilience. Anxiety then is not your enemy, but a messenger. If you ignore the message, it grows louder. But if you respond with compassion and care, you discover that anxiety was never meant to destroy you. It was meant to guide you toward healing, awareness, and a healthier life. Chronic anxiety often comes from overactivity in certain brain regions, not from weakness or lack of willpower. For generations, people struggling with anxiety have been told to simply calm down, get over it, or stop worrying so much, as if anxiety were nothing more than a personality flaw or a lack of mental toughness. This way of thinking not only creates stigma, but also hides the truth. Anxiety has a biological foundation. It is rooted in the way the brain functions, and in many cases, it reflects areas of the brain working too hard rather than an individual being weak. One of the main brain regions linked to anxiety is the amygdala. This almond-shaped cluster of neurons deep in the brain acts as the emotional alarm system, constantly scanning for potential threats. In people with chronic anxiety, the amygdala tends to be hyperactive. If it perceives danger everywhere, even in safe environments, and triggers a fight or flight response at the wrong times. That constant state of vigilance creates the physical symptoms of anxiety, racing heart, tense muscles, shallow breathing, and restless energy. These symptoms aren't imagined, they are real biological responses driven by brain activity. Another area often involved is the anterior cingulate gyrus, which helps the brain shift attention and adapt to new information. When this region is overactive, the mind gets stuck in loops of worry and repetitive thought patterns. This is why people with chronic anxiety often describe feeling unable to stop overthinking no matter how hard they try. It is not weakness, it is circuitry firing too intensely, locking the brain into patterns of fear and anticipation. Even the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for judgment and rational thought, plays a role. In some cases of chronic anxiety, the prefrontal cortex struggles to regulate the overactive emotional centers. The logical part of the brain may know that a situation is not truly dangerous, but the emotional brain is so dominant that reason cannot quiet the fear. This imbalance leaves the person feeling powerless, not because they lack willpower, but because their brain systems are out of alignment. Understanding anxiety in this way changes the conversation. Instead of labeling people as weak, lazy, or dramatic, it allows us to see that they are experiencing a medical condition rooted in brain function. Just as no one would tell a person with asthma to breathe harder, it makes no sense to tell someone with chronic anxiety to just relax. Their brain is wired to stay on high alert, and overcoming that requires strategies that calm and rebalance brain activity, not shame or blame. Fortunately, the brain is not fixed. Neuroplasticity means it can change with the right interventions. Practices like meditation, deep breathing, exercise, and therapy help calm overactive circuits. Nutrition, supplements, and in some cases, medication can support chemical balance, giving the brain the tools it needs to reset. Over time, these choices rewire pathways, so the alarm system is less reactive and the rational brain can take back control. When seen through this lens, chronic anxiety becomes less of a personal failure and more of a call for compassion and healing. It is not about willpower. It is about working with the brain, training it to quiet down, and creating an environment where it can function as it was designed. This understanding not only reduces stigma, but also offers hope because it shows that anxiety can be managed, calmed, and even transformed through intentional choices and support. Lifestyle choices, sleep, diet, and exercise directly affect how anxious or calm the brain feels. Anxiety does not arise in isolation. It is deeply influenced by the way we live each day. The brain, like every other organ in the body, requires consistent care and balance to function well. When sleep is disrupted, when nutrition is poor, and when physical movement is neglected, the brain's chemistry shifts in ways that fuel worry, tension, and fear. On the other hand, when these basic pillars of health are respected, the brain finds stability and resilience, making calm not only possible, but natural. Sleep is perhaps the most overlooked factor in managing anxiety. During sleep, especially in the deeper stages, the brain processes emotional experiences, clears toxins, and resets stress hormones. Without enough rest, the amygdala, the brain's alarm center, becomes hyperactive, exaggerating threats and magnifying fears. At the same time, the prefrontal cortex, which normally provides logic and perspective, becomes sluggish and less able to regulate emotional responses. This imbalance leaves people feeling edgy, irritable, and more vulnerable to anxious thoughts. A single night of poor sleep can heighten worry, but Chronic sleep deprivation can create a cycle where anxiety worsens over time, making rest even harder to achieve. Diet plays an equally powerful role. The brain runs on the fuel we provide, and certain foods either calm or inflame its delicate systems. Diets heavy in refined sugar, processed foods, and caffeine overstimulate the nervous system, causing blood sugar spikes and crashes that mimic the physiological sensations of anxiety, racing heart, jittery energy, and sudden mood swings. Over time, these choices disrupt neurotransmitter balance, lowering levels of serotonin and GABA, which are the brain's natural calming chemicals. In contrast, nutrient dense foods such as leafy greens, fatty fish, nuts, seeds, and berries provide the building blocks the brain needs for stability. Omega-3 fatty acids reduce inflammation and strengthen neural connections, while magnesium and B vitamins regulate stress responses. By choosing foods that nourish rather than agitate, we create an internal environment that supports calm. Exercise is the third pillar, and its impact on anxiety is profound. Movement not only strengthens the body, but also recalibrates the brain. Physical activity releases endorphins, chemicals that elevate mood and counteract stress. Exercise also reduces cortisol, the primary stress hormone, which in excess drives anxious feelings. Just 20 to 30 minutes of consistent movement, whether it is walking, swimming, or dancing, can provide immediate relief from restlessness and tension. Over time, exercise reshapes the brain itself, improving blood flow, enhancing connectivity, and supporting the growth of new neurons in areas tied to emotional regulation. The result is a brain more resilient to stress and less prone to spiraling into anxiety. What is remarkable is how quickly changes in lifestyle can shift the brain's experience of anxiety. A week of consistent sleep, a diet centered on whole foods, and regular movement can begin to calm an overactive system. These habits do not erase all worry, but they strengthen the brain's foundation so that stress does not overwhelm. Anxiety becomes easier to manage, not through sheer willpower, but through biology working in your favor. In the end, the choices we make each day are not small. They are signals to the brain, teaching it how to feel. Every night of rest, every nourishing meal, every step of movement tells the brain you are safe, you are supported, you can be calm. Thoughts shape brain chemistry. Negative patterns fuel anxiety, while intentional positive thinking rewires the brain for calm. This truth is both sobering and empowering because it reminds us that what goes on in the mind is not abstract. It directly influences the way the brain works at a chemical and structural level. Every thought we repeat becomes a signal, and those signals either strengthen fear or promote peace. Over time, the brain adapts to the thoughts we feed it, wiring itself to expect and reproduce similar patterns. This is why worry feels automatic for many people. They have unknowingly trained their brains to focus on danger, uncertainty, and self-doubt. Negative thoughts fuel anxiety because the brain treats them as reality. When you imagine worst case scenarios, dwell on mistakes, or repeat stories of failure in your head, the amygdala lights up as though a real threat is present. Stress hormones like cortisol flood the system, heart rate increases, and muscles tense, all because of an internal thought that carried no physical danger. The more often this cycle repeats, the stronger those neural pathways become. The brain becomes skilled at spotting danger, even when it doesn't exist, keeping you in a constant state of alertness. This is why people trapped in cycles of anxious thinking often feel powerless. Their brains have literally been conditioned to expect the worst. But just as negative thought patterns can train the brain into fear, intentional, positive thinking can train it into calm. When you shift focus toward gratitude, hope, or solutions, different areas of the brain activate. Neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine increase, creating feelings of safety, motivation, and well-being. Over time, practicing these kinds of thoughts strengthens new pathways and weakens the old ones, a process known as neuroplasticity. The brain rewires itself, making calm and optimism more natural states rather than forced efforts. This does not mean ignoring problems or pretending life is always perfect. Positive thinking is not about denial. It is about choosing which perspective will dominate your mental landscape. Instead of letting the mind dwell on endless what ifs, you learn to direct it toward what can I do now? That shift calms the emotional centers and engages the rational brain, reducing the intensity of anxiety. Even small practices like writing down three things you are grateful for, reframing setbacks as lessons, or practicing self compassion in moments of failure can redirect brain chemistry in powerful ways. The brain listens to the story you tell it. If the story is filled with fear and hopelessness, the brain will respond with chemicals that reinforce those feelings. If the story is filled with possibility and solutions, the brain will respond with calm and clarity. This is why awareness of your thought life is so essential. You are not stuck with the same anxious brain forever. You can guide it into health uh, by consistently choosing better patterns of thought. The transformation may not happen overnight, but it is real and measurable. Each intentional thought, each moment of gratitude, each choice to focus on peace over panic is like laying a new brick in the foundation of a calmer brain. Over weeks and months, the architecture of your mind begins to shift. What once was a battlefield of anxious loops becomes a space where calm is not only possible, but practiced and reinforced. In this way, your thoughts become medicine, shaping your brain into an ally rather than an enemy. Simple tools like deep breathing, mindfulness, and gratitude can calm the brain's alarm system. The brain is designed with survival in mind, and at the center of that design is the amygdala, which constantly scans for threats when it perceives danger, real or imagined. It sets off the fight or flight response, flooding the body with stress hormones, raising heart rate, and narrowing focus. This system is useful when escaping real danger, but in modern life, it often becomes overactive. Responding to daily stressors like traffic, deadlines, or conflict in the same way it would to a predator, living in this constant state of alert creates anxiety, exhaustion, and long-term health issues. What many people don't realize is that simple daily practices can send powerful signals to this alarm system, teaching the brain to calm down and return to balance.
Yeah.
Deep breathing is one of the most immediate tools to quiet the alarm. When stress hits, breathing naturally becomes shallow and rapid, which tells the brain that danger is present. By intentionally slowing the breath and breathing deeply into the diaphragm, you flip that signal. Long, steady exhales activate the parasympathetic nervous system, the body's calming response, and send a message to the amygdala that the threat has passed. Within minutes, heart rate slows, muscles relax, and the brain begins to shift away from panic. Practicing this regularly creates a habit of resilience. So even in stressful moments, the body remembers how to return to calm. Mindfulness adds another layer of healing by training attention. Anxiety thrives on mental time travel, rehashing past mistakes, or anticipating future disasters. This constant cycle convinces the brain that danger is everywhere. With mindfulness, interrupts that loop by anchoring awareness in the present moment. Whether it is focusing on the sensation of breath, the feeling of your feet on the ground, or the sounds around you, mindfulness teaches the brain to pause instead of react. With time, this practice shrinks the overactivity of the amygdala and strengthens the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that provides perspective and rational control. The result is a calmer, more balanced mind that responds thoughtfully instead of reflexively. Gratitude works in a different but equally powerful way. The brain naturally has a negativity bias, meaning it pays more attention to threats and problems than to blessings. This bias keeps the alarm system constantly primed. Practicing gratitude rewires that bias. By intentionally focusing on what is good, writing down three things you are grateful for each day, or pausing to appreciate small moments, you train the brain to shift its attention. Gratitude boosts dopamine and serotonin, the brain's natural feel good chemicals, and sends a signal to the amygdala that life is safer and more abundant than it appears. Over time, this practice reduces baseline anxiety and builds resilience against stress. When combined, deep breathing, mindfulness, and gratitude create a powerful toolkit for calming the brain's alarm system. None of them require expensive resources or complicated routines. They only require consistency. Each time you breathe deeply, return to the present, or express gratitude, you are telling your brain you are safe. With repetition, the alarm system learns to quiet itself, making peace and calm not fleeting states, but steady companions in daily life. Healing anxiety means listening to your brain's message and responding with compassion, not shame. Too often, people view anxiety as a flaw or a sign of weakness. They tell themselves they should be stronger, more disciplined, or more in control. This inner dialogue adds layers of guilt and shame to the anxiety, creating a cycle where the very attempt to fight it makes it worse. But anxiety is not an enemy to be crushed. It is a signal from the brain. It is the mind's way of saying something needs your attention. When we shift from blaming ourselves to listening with compassion, anxiety transforms from a burden into a guide toward healing. At its core, anxiety is the brain's alarm system. It becomes active when it senses danger or imbalance. Sometimes the danger is external, a stressful job, a toxic relationship, or financial uncertainty. Other times it is internal, poor sleep, nutrient deficiencies, unresolved trauma, or even an overactive brain circuit. When the alarm rings, the message is not that you are broken. It is that your brain is asking for care. Responding with shame ignores this message, while responding with compassion allows us to investigate what the brain is truly communicating. Compassion means stepping back and asking gentle questions. What am I feeling? Where is this coming from? What does my brain need right now? Sometimes the answer might be rest, other times movement, a nourishing meal, or a conversation with a trusted friend. By approaching anxiety as a messenger rather than an enemy, you begin to meet its underlying needs instead of suppressing its signals. This compassionate approach not only eases anxiety in the moment, but also teaches the brain that it is safe and supported. Shame, by contrast, only magnifies the alarm. When you criticize yourself for being anxious, telling yourself you're weak or failing, you trigger even more stress. The amygdala interprets this inner attack as further danger, releasing more stress hormones and reinforcing anxious thought patterns. In this way, shame acts as fuel for anxiety, keeping the cycle alive. Compassion interrupts that loop. When you reassure yourself, breathe deeply, and remind yourself that anxiety is a signal, not a sentence, you lower the intensity of the alarm and create space for healing. This perspective also empowers change. Compassion does not mean giving up or resigning yourself to anxiety. It means acknowledging where you are and giving yourself the tools to move forward. With compassion, you can adopt practices like mindfulness, better sleep routines, balanced nutrition, or therapy without the weight of guilt. You begin to see yourself not as someone broken, but as someone healing. Each choice you make toward balance becomes an act of respect for your brain's signals and your body's needs. Healing anxiety is not about silencing the alarm with force, but about learning to hear what it is telling you. When you respond with compassion instead of shame, you shift from fighting yourself to caring for yourself. That shift is powerful. It quiets the alarm system, restores balance to the brain, and opens the door to lasting calm. Anxiety stops being a source of suffering and becomes a teacher guiding you toward deeper self understanding and greater resilience.